I am very happy to introduce you to my friend Joe Perricone of Perricone Juices, producers of fresh orange juice here in Southern California since the 1940s. Joe comes from one of those Catholic families who came to California in the 1920s and 30s, usually with very little to start with, who not only found success in business, but were instrumental in building up the Catholic community to prepare it for the tremendous growth we have seen in the church in Southern California and here in our own Diocese of Orange. Joe is an excellent example of business and ethics working together. When his company experienced a significant financial success a few years ago, Joe made sure that that success was shared with his employees, some of whom had worked for the company for many, many years. When forced to let go employees because of their undocumented status, Joe promised them their jobs back if they got their legal status to work. He shared with me his joy when one day one of those same employees arrived a few years later with her new citizenship papers, ready to go back to work. For these reasons and many others, Joe is an excellent choice for recognition at this year's Orange Catholic Foundation Conference on Business and Ethics. In addition to his business life, Joe is a quiet but generous supporter of his parish, Our Lady Queen of Angels, and the Diocese of Orange's new Christ Cathedral project, as well as weekend retreats throughout the year. A couple of years ago, Joe inspired a friend to become a Catholic. And when the new Catholic asked Joe to be the godfather of his child, he was thrilled. I value Joe's friendship, and I hope that you will have the opportunity to meet him and get to know this fine Catholic businessman who practices what he preaches and walks the walk of faith and ethics.
Good morning. My name is Karen Perricone, and it was with great pride for me to introduce my husband, Joe Perricone. He is being honored at this year's conference on business and ethics, and anyone who knows Joe also knows that this is the perfect honor for him. Joe lives his life based on spirituality, faith, principles, and ethics. God and family are very important in his life, which were values that were instilled in him at a very young age by his Catholic education, his mother, and his grandmother. Joe's dad instilled the importance of a strong work ethic. Joe is dedicated to his family and has passed all those values down to our kids and our grandkids. He lives by example. Joe has many great qualities and characteristics. His core values are honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, humility, forgiveness, acceptance, and a willingness to help others whenever and however he can. God and faith play a very important role in our lives. Joe has the willingness and awareness to go out of his way to help others. I want to share an example of Joe's service to others. Joe befriended a homeless man named David, and he did all he could to help him get off the streets, including bringing him to our home and into our house. He found a place to stay and to work, but with his mental health issues, he had a hard time conforming to society. Unfortunately, David ended back up living on the streets because that's where he was most comfortable. He knew how to survive on the streets, but not in society. Joe continued to help him in any way he could. David was unique in the fact that when Joe gave David money, David always gave Joe a receipt to show what he bought. When David died, the coroner called to say that David had listed Joe as his next of kin. And because of Joe's close friendship with David, he knew that David had a son, but hadn't seen him in a long time and didn't know where he lived. With the help of the coroner and the police, Joe was able to find his son. This is just one example of how Joe lives his life in awareness and willingness to be of service to others whenever possible. All of his values are a result of his Catholic education, family, and friends who have had a huge impact on his life. Joe, I'm so proud and honored to introduce you today. I love you.
Pretty hard act to follow. The bishop, Monsignor Carey and my wife. How do you do that? I don't know how you do that, but I'm going to try. First of all, I want to thank Bishop Vann, who has become really a close friend of mine, and I love you, Bishop, and we are so blessed here in Orange County. When I was a young boy, I was an altar boy at All Souls School, and one of the new priests was saying Mass there, and he actually was working in LA, and that new priest was Bishop William Johnson, and I used to serve Mass for him. And he became a friend of our families, and later on he became the first bishop of Orange County. I would see him once in a while, and we would smile and go back to our roots, back at All Souls. And now time has gone on, and I've become really a close friend of Bishop Vann's, and I am just blessed for that. And I want to thank you for all that you do for me and for this. We're very blessed to have you in Orange County. Thank you so much. And I want to thank my friend Monsignor Carey, who wasn't always my friend. So one day, real quickly, I'd only have a few minutes. I could take a long time on this. And so he and I had a little discussion, and I didn't quite agree with his point of view, so I went home and I said, honey, I have a problem. I don't get along with Father Carey. And I started going to another Catholic church, and Our Lady Queen of Angels is 2 blocks from our house. And so I called Father Anthony, and I said, I don't know what to do. So I called Father Carey and said, can I meet with you? And I met with him, and the following week, we went out and spent the day together, and we had an Italian eggplant sandwich, right? And from that time on, he's become a really close friend. And so I started giving him juice because I wanted to butter him up, that's what we do. And so one day he said to me, he said, Joe, there's a parishioner here in the parish that they want to transfer him. He works for this big company. They want to transfer him to some other state, and he's got young kids and his nice wife and his family here. Would you meet with him? So I met with this young man who's under 50. I call him young. And so I met with Bob, and one thing led to another, and Bob's here with his wife, Betsy, and Bob is my partner at the juice company, all because of Monsignor Carey, and I am so grateful for that. Thank you, Monsignor, and thank you, Bob. Now to go back in history, my Aunt Mary's here, who saw me as a young child. My sister Lucy is here, who saw me as not much of a child. And I want to thank you both for being here. My brother's not here. But I want to also spend this time to thank my wife for what she does for me. She's worked so hard on this event, behind the scenes, making sure everybody got the right seats. And I'm sorry that somebody was back there, he ended up here, but she has done so much hard work, and I love you, honey, and thank you so much for being part of my life. I appreciate you. Some of our children are here. Joe and his wife Dina, Vinny and his wife they have 4 kids, so she couldn't come. Colleen and her husband, Austin Lombard, who's the city councilman of Tustin, just remember that, okay? And our son Darren. So thank you guys for all being here. It's a long drive for some of you. My sister will remember this. When we were younger, we went to All Souls Catholic Church. And it was an automatic for us. We didn't say we want to go to Catholic school. Our parents decided that we were going to All Souls. And we went to All Souls school, and my mother, we always talk about dads, when we're growing up sometimes, but really my mother was the reason that we got that education. She would wake up and get us to school every day. She would pick us up. Sometimes I would not be there, and she would get upset with me, but she would always be there for us. She was the mother who would take all of us kids to games. We had a station wagon that she would drive us, and she would take all my friends to the games, and it was just incredible what she did for me and for my brother and my sister. And my dad was off working, and that's what they did in those days. It wasn't like today. The father went to work, the mother took care of the kids. Today is joint partnership, but it was different in those days. So we had these holy name nuns who taught us what about spirituality, values, and what it was like just to be loved by God. And I was brought up pre-Vatican II, so I had this judgmental God the way I was taught there. But all of a sudden, in the last 20 years, my perception of my God has changed. I have this God who is not judgmental, but very forgiving and merciful. And I see that in all these people, and I see that in all of you. And the people I see on the streets, I see them as children of God. And so the way I was brought up with these values, these moral values, with my Catholic education, with my family, it was easy for me to be nice to that homeless guy, Dave. It wasn't hard for me, because that was just a natural thing to do. Yesterday, when I was driving home, I saw this little boy run across the street. And I looked at him, and it was my rearview mirror. And I was wondering what was going on with him. And I kept looking, and he seemed to be frailing and crying. And so I made a U-turn, and I thought about it for a second. And I said, am I going to get in trouble for even talking to this little boy? I mean, that's where we've gone today. But anyway, I said, forget about it. I'm going to see how he's doing. So I drove up to him, and I rolled down my window, and I said, are you okay? And he said, I'm okay. But anyway, that's all because of the way I was taught, and that's the way that I was brought up. And I'm so grateful for all of you for being here. Some of my friends over here, we've been friends for a long time. We have these values that we need to carry on with our children and our friends, whoever we see, because we're so blessed. Anyway, thank you very much.